Welcome everyone. My name is Varnai. I'm a member of urbaMonde and I'm the co-host with Marine for today's webinar. So welcome to everyone. I will just stop the screen share for a second so that you can actually see us for 2 seconds before we get started. So yeah, again, welcome everyone to this webinar on community-based finance for affordable housing. As you may know, this is our second session of this short webinar series. We will be able also to share the link to our previous webinar later on, so that you can go back to the webinar that we hosted at the end of March. So again, welcome to everyone. We're really glad to have our speakers on board and panelists that we will present just in a few minutes. But before, I'll hand over Marine to you just for a few introductory words on, what this webinar is about and also about CAF.
Great, thank you so much, Bea, and welcome everyone on our second webinar on community-based finance scheme to finance affordable housing. We hosted the first one back in March, which was laying the foundation of the mechanism that we're going to talk about today, and especially how we're going from projects to scale today. Just a quick word about CAF, so the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. We are a think tank based in Johannesburg. We've been active for 8 years now, and our mission is to create information about affordable housing and about the financing of affordable housing, and then to disseminate this information and to bring all the stakeholders together to kind of all be on the same foot of information. And so today is especially an embodiment of what we're doing, in the sense that we have co-financed with urbaMonde and urbaCenter study, which was proposing a benchmark of community-based finance scheme for affordable housing across Africa, and then focusing especially on the case of Senegal. And today, the fact that we can host this webinar is really the purpose and the mission of CAF, to bring everyone together and to disseminate the information that has been created. One thing that CAF really tries and do is focusing on the value chain of the housing sector, and really showing how everyone in the chain can be part of the change and can be part of the increase in affordable housing, and everyone is very important in it. And we are discovering more and more with this webinar how especially the end user can be part of the value chain and can have agency over it. So thank you very much, and have a great webinar. Thank you, Bea.
Thank you, Marine. So we at urbaMonde, so we are a non-profit organization based in France and Switzerland. As Marine said, we have long-standing cooperation with Senegal and other West African countries, but also we work on community-led urban development and housing in other areas, really, including Europe, Latin America, Asia. What we're particularly interested in, and we're interested in this benchmark or short study that we published together with CAF, was really, as Marine said, this, the links between the different sectors working together on providing solutions, mechanisms to the housing adequacy and affordability challenge, and really looking at this community agency, as Marine said, so how we can build those mechanisms also from the bottom up. Today's webinar really will also be interested in, as we said, in the scale. So we will be asking about, how can we go beyond pilot projects? How can we look at really putting these solutions to scale? And we have really some amazing speakers and expertise around here today that can talk about that in a minute. So maybe just for those who joined a little bit late, just a very short reminder, we have translation available. So if you're a French speaker, please choose in the little globe on the bottom right, you can choose your channel, the language that suits you best. And then also, please feel free to ask any questions during the webinar, to write them in the chat. So we have this question and answer section, but also the general chat. And we will save some time at the end of the presentations to come back to them. So please feel free at any time to ask your questions, make comments, even present yourself. So really use it as a tool to interact with the audience. So now I have the honor to present our speakers, the three panelists that are here with us today. So welcome to Daniel, who is Associate Director at Habitat for Humanity. Particularly, Daniel has long-standing experience in digital finance and has worked in various positions. If I'm right, Daniel, mainly in Tanzania, in very different types of organizations, consultancies, banks, private sector. You are trained in IT and also in management and a certified director, and you joined Habitat for Humanity, the Africa Hub, in 2021. So quite recently. So welcome to this webinar, and we will be really looking forward to hearing about the Microbuild Fund, which is quite an impressive cooperation of very different types of actors at very different scales that you will be presenting to us. Thank you for joining. Our second speaker will be Jacinta from Kenya. Welcome to you as well, Jacinta. You are a community development specialist at Akiba Mashinani Trust, based in Kenya. As far as I know, you have been traveling and working across much of Kenya in very different areas of the country. You're trained in cooperative management and sociology. So as I understand your role, and we will be hearing from you about this, is really the work alongside the communities, training them in their financial tools, setting up financial corporations or cooperatives with savings groups. And you are the regional and program manager of the Rift Valley at Akiba Mashinani Trust, which you joined in 2011. So we will be looking forward to hearing from you also in just a few minutes. And our third speaker, Zama, welcome to you as well, who's joining from South Africa, Cape Town, and from an organization called Development Action Group, which I understand you joined in 2005, if I'm not wrong. So you have a very long experience with Development Action Group. You're a program manager, and you lead the Contractor and Developer Academy for micro developers, which we will be hearing from just in a few minutes. You have also extensive experience on informal settlement upgrading and urban land management, informal settlement regularization, and as I understand, working very much at the community level, supporting community-based processes in these sectors. So, and at the same time facilitating public policy dialogue, which is also something that we will hear from you today in your presentation. So really welcome to our three speakers, panelists, and I suggest we start right away. The idea that the way we set up these presentations are a few questions, so we will be hearing from our various speakers one after the other, following a few questions, so that we can sort of start a conversation that we hope to then extend in dialogue with the audience. So again, feel free to put your questions in the chat while we listen to our speakers. So Jacinta, over to you for our first question. So we would really like to hear from you about, what is Akiba Mashinani Trust for those who don't know it, and how does this really link to community-led development and housing processes?
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Jacinta. I'm from Kenya. I work with Akiba Mashinani Trust, which is a financial vehicle of the federation called Mongano or Wanavijiji. Mongano Wanavijiji is a Kiswahili word, which means corporations in the villages. It's just the unity of people who are living within the villages. So Akiba Mashinani Trust was established in the year 2002, and its main aim was to be the vehicle of the people living in the slums, targeting their living standards and ensuring that they also get an equal share like the other people are living in good life within the urban areas. So what I'm going to do, I'll not read everything which is in my presentation, but I'll just elaborate so that you can understand what Akiba Mashinani is. So Akiba Mashinani Trust, being a financial vehicle of the people living in the slums, we have our own clientele. We have our target people who are the vegetable vendors, the people living in the unplanned areas within Kenya, the biggest slums in Kenya. We have Mukuru Wajenga, we have Mathare slums, we have Uruma, we have other slums within Mombasa, slums within Kisumu, and other slums within the big towns in Kenya. So the reason why Akiba Mashinani Trust came in, we realized that our members have small savings they have been keeping within their houses and in their homesteads, and they were not able to utilize them and do tangible projects with them, and their living standards within the slums was really disturbing. So as a financial vehicle of Mongano, we thought it was good for us to chip in. We train them in their settlement areas. So within the settlement areas, we had to categorize them into clusters so that we can operate in a group of within 10 to 15 members, because the slums are always big and we cannot reach everyone at any given time. After setting up these small clusters, we had to do an election of the leadership within the slum areas, and every cluster had to produce 3 members who will be their leaders. The first leader who has to be established is the chairperson, who has to run all the projects within the slum areas and within that cluster. He is the one who is supposed to give us the feedback on the problem they're encountering within that cluster, what they require from us as Akiba Mashinani Trust, and also to give us the number of people who are living within that cluster. So they had to do a survey and give us the number of people who are living there. The second leader is the secretary, whom we have to get minutes during our meetings, and we have to know what they have discussed within their minutes and Akiba Mashinani Trust to assist them with. The third person is the treasurer. The treasurer is the person who has to go around. They have to go door to door, collecting the money. We call it chingli chingli. In English, coin by coin. So every evening after their market day, the treasurer has to go around with a book, collecting even if it's $1, $2, or what that person needs to save for that day. So that was the initial target of the people of the slums by Akiba Mashinani Trust. After the establishment of all these clusters and getting our setup, we had to look at what are our operating principles? What are we targeting? Is this activity cost effective enough and efficient for our members, because these are low income earners? Is it inclusive of every person who is poor and living within that slum area? Can we promote the local savings, and how can we promote it? So in the third point of promoting the local savings, we have to carry out some trainings within the local meetings. We have to give them in the language that they can understand how to do the savings of either $1 and how that dollar can help them. We also had to employ some systems which are workable for them. We don't go via the accounting system, which is usually done via the accounts, but we had to do just a small bookkeeping and all that. We also have to promote the management. How do we promote the management? We have also to do a training for the leaders tell them what we expect from them, what are their roles, and what are the reports we expect them to produce at the end of the training. So the next point, after the appropriate financial sources. So during these trainings, during these meetings, we came to realize that these people, they cannot bring out their savings and also do tangible projects with the money because it's very little. Their businesses are very small and they want to advance. They want to grow their businesses. So what is the role of Akiba Mashinani Trust? We assist these people. So that is when Akiba Mashinani comes in. We inject some little money, which is the capital. We start loaning them so that they can boost their businesses. The process of loaning goes by their savings, how much they have in their shares, what this person needs to do with this little money they have in their accounts, what is their target, and what are their goals. So that is how we finance our people. They have to do an application, we have to verify, we have to do our groundwork, and we have also to get a little interest from these people for commitment. So during the learning process, there's something we call appraisal. If our member is a new member in the market, we have to advise them on what kind of a business one can start with, maybe $100, which can also bring interest. If it is an existing business, we have to talk to our clients and they give us an idea of what they want to do to advance or to increase their business. So those are our operating principles, and that is how we work with our members from each and every cluster within the slums. So we go to the next one. So from our organizational structure, we have the general meetings. Our organizational structure is very unique from any other setup of every organization. This general meeting comprises of all our members. All the slum areas, these are the head of Akiba Mashinani Trust. From the general meeting, we have the board of trustees. That is where we have people elected by the Mongano themselves. Our board of trustees comes from the slum areas or comes from the federation. They are the ones who heads all the operations within Mongano. They are the ones who comes up within a certain cluster, within a certain slum. And this is our expectation as an organization. Can you assist us on ABCD? The other person is the ED, who is our executive director. The executive director is the head of Akiba Mashinani Trust, and I know is the one who heads the organization. Akiba Mashinani Trust is an NGO. And being an NGO, we operate in different regions within Kenya. So under her, that is where we have all other employees, where we have the finance, where we have the M&T, and where we have all the staffs who are being employed within each and every region to run all the activities which Akiba Mashinani needs to finance. I personally work in the Rift region of Kenya, which is called the Rift Valley region. The Rift Valley region, I have around 8 counties which I run, from Nakuru all the way to Kitale. But in my region, we don't have slums per se. But in the other areas like in Nakuru, Nairobi, we have slums which are owned by the government, but our members are also living there, legally or illegally. So I'll explain that when we go to the housing part. So our operational areas, as I've said, we have Nairobi region, where we have our major slums. Everyone who has been in Nairobi and been reading on the papers, that is where we have Mukuru. Right now, we have something called the SPA, that is the Special Planning Program. We have incorporated ourselves with the government of Kenya, and we have made it as a special planning area. Why is it a special planning area? 3/4 of the people living in houses are very poorly planned. Most of them, they don't even have sanitation, they don't have roads, all the infrastructures are lacking within that biggest slum of Kenya. It occupies over 1,000 acres. And also, being just within the city, the capital city of Kenya in Nairobi, we had to come up with a plan on how we can replan that slum and also bring a newer face of Nairobi. The other region is Rift Valley, where I'm working, and I have already explained about Nairobi and the slums in Nairobi. In Rift Valley region, we have a different setup of housing and mode of operation. So most of our clients are also coming from the slum areas. The slum areas in Nakuru or in the Rift Valley region are owned by individuals, unlike the slums in Nairobi, which are government owned. So I'll explain that during the presentation of our housing. So the mode of housing we have in Nakuru is totally different with the mode of housing in Nairobi. In Nakuru, we have what we call greenfields. In Nairobi, we have slum upgrading projects. We are also operating in the coast region, where we are in the 3 counties in the coast region. That is Mombasa County, Kwale County, and also in Kilifi County. That is where we work in coast region. In central region, we are also operating in Thika, we are in Meru, we are in Embu, and some parts of Kiambu. In Nyanza region, we are in Kisumu, in the western part of Kenya, Kakamega, and also on the farthest end at the border of Uganda. In the eastern region, we are in Machakos, Kitui County. We are also in Makueni County and part of Makueni County, which is almost at the end of the coast region. So those are our operating areas, which have been in operation since the year 2002. In Akiba Mashinani Trust, we have several services we offer to our clients' needs. We have to discuss with our clients what they want to do, unlike how the other organizations operate. We have to sit down with our clients and look at what is workable for them. First of all, we have a corporate account, which is mainly managed by the community and audited by AMT. As I've explained earlier, our members do savings. During their savings and in their meetings, they don't bank money with Akiba Mashinani Trust. Each and every group is advised to have their own account. That is why they have their leadership. They have their own account. We get their bank accounts and do audit according to what they are doing within their regions and how the money is being used. We also have what you call administration fund, which is basically the general operation fund, which we get from our different donors. Our major donor being SDI, Slum Dwellers International. I'll also explain that later. The other service we offer is the daily savings deposit account. As I had explained earlier, in our cluster, we have our treasurers who moves door to door, collecting money. This money is registered in what we call a black book. And each and every member of us has what we call a member savings book. So when a member gives out their $1, for example, it is recorded by the treasurer on their passbook, and also the treasurer has to record it in the black book, so that when we are doing audit, we can get hold of the treasurer's book, the member's passbook, and also the bank statement for reconciliation. The other service we offer is what we call the MDF, share capital. MDF means Mongano Development Fund. This fund is basically used for loan acquisition. As you well know, shares is what enables one to get a loan. So that is another fund we have for our members. We also have the welfare fund. This welfare fund is basically run by the community on any need that arises. Maybe one of the members is unwell, they can use the money in that welfare fund to support their member in case of any death or anything related to welfare fund. So we have that account for the welfare fund. We also have the corporate loan account. This corporate loan account is where we have the loan basket, where all the donor money, which is supposed to be given out as loans to our member, comes in. And this is basically managed by Akiba Mashinani Trust. But definitely we have to report back to the donor on how this money has been used, who it has been used on, and what kind of project the money has been used on. The other service we offer, we have something called collective investment account. Collective investment account is, for example, if we have money which is just lying in the banks, we don't just leave that money there. We take it into an investment account like in the Britam, where we can earn an interest at the end of the month or at the end of the year. So we also advocate to our members, if they have money lying in the account, which they don't want to use either to purchase land, to give out small loans to their members, they can invest it and get an interest out of it. And at the end of the year, they can give it out to their members as dividends. The other service we have is managing community banking organization. Banking organization is what we call the village banks. From the clusters, that is where we advocate. These people must own their own, they must have their own account, which is being led and run by the members within that community. So in this case, the only thing AMT comes in and does is just to do audits and reconciliation to make sure that money is not mismanaged by the leaders in the group, and also to make sure that money is used according to its purpose. The other service we offer is business enterprise development services. As I had explained earlier, most of our members are very new in businesses. They don't have money to start their own. Our members are within an agricultural area. What can we do as an organization to assist these people market their produce? What can we do in the market linkages? How can we also do barter trade? We have people in Nairobi who don't do farming. We have people in Nakuru who can do farming. So how can we do barter trade and also improve the livelihood of our people within the ground, on the ground, sorry. The last one is the housing development services. That being our core activity within the slums, all these others has to come up because we need capital for construction. We need capital to improve the lives of these people. We need capital to replant the slums where these people are living in. So the housing development services is basically done by Akiba Mashinani Trust jointly with the community, but we also have to involve the government because there is a process on housing. We have to do our house dreaming with our members. We have to come up with the housing plans. Eventually, the government has to approve all these plans so that they can help us to start doing the construction. So basically, those are the services Akiba Mashinani Trust offers to our members. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jacinta. I would ask you please to, if you could conclude in just one last minute, because we...
Okay, sorry. I'm taking okay. So I think this one is self-explanatory because you had asked about the operational capital, which is self-explanatory and everyone can see what we have been doing. But currently we are slow on finances because of the COVID issues and the COVID effects. So we are still trying to see on which other ways we can manage to uplift our people and also assist them as their financial basket within the Mongano Federation. So thank you so much and nice listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta. We will come back in a few minutes to you just for a case study that we see concretely how this translates. It's a really impressive set of instruments and things that you have put in place with Akiba Mashinani Trust. And I'm sure we could listen for a long time to all the things you're doing. But
thank you.
Right now, I would like to hand over to Daniel. Daniel, to tell us a bit about the Microbuild Fund and how you work at different levels through this fund in supporting affordable housing. Over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Mia. I think you gave quite a brief introduction of myself. So perhaps just briefly, I'm Daniel Mhina, Associate Director, Housing Finance for Habitat for Humanity, Africa. So if we go to the topic at hand, perhaps I should start with the genesis of why or how did Microbuild actually start. So it emerged basically from the realization, and this is coming from the market, in terms of the need of the market towards microloans. And we came to realize that majority of funds are being diverted. If you look at business loans and personal loans, most of them are being diverted towards housing loans. And hence then we saw the need of having housing microfinance loans towards supporting a majority of the low-income households. And when you talk about the housing microfinance finance loans, we talk about things like home improvement, the land purchase. We talk about small constructions, and this can be an addition of a room to a normal house, or it can be a full construction. And hence then Microbuild, if you move to the next slide, please. And hence then Microbuild started in 2012. This was the first impact investment vehicle. And it was basically dedicated towards housing microfinance, towards actually giving debt capital to MFIs, and offering through Habitat for Humanity technical assistance or technical expertise to help the MFIs, for those who don't have to build the products, but for those that have to refine the product to ensure that the product is appropriate and really addresses the housing microfinance needs of low-income clients. So the fund size when it started was 100 million USD, broken down in 10 million in equity and 90 million in debt. And basically Habitat's role was to offer the technical assistance, but also we injected almost 5.1 million in equity as a sponsorship, and also a 10 million USD just as a letter of credit. But mostly it was towards the effort towards actually building capacity and technical assistance to majority of the MFIs. If you move to another slide, please. So basically, as you're moving to another slide, so if you look at the structure as in summary, sorry, can you go back to the other slide? I wanted to just to summarize the. So if you look at, if you move previous slide, please. Yeah. So if you look at the Microbuild fund, so there are different players. So Habitat was offering the technical assistance on top of the other instruments that we actually added, but mostly it was the technical assistance. We had a funds manager who was actually looking at the funds, and hence the process started from the 100 million Microbuild fund to support the MFIs with the aim of them actually growing towards 200 million and towards $1 billion in mobilized fund after demonstrating. And hence then that capital through the MFI, then the MFI offering microloans to the majority of the low-income household. So that was how it was actually channeled across. And we will see some of the achievements in the following slides. If you move to another slide, please. So, yeah, so the technical assistance basically was, as I mentioned earlier, it's to support the growth of the housing portfolio from MFIs. And this started from doing the KYC in terms of understanding who's the right SME to actually invest in. And then looking at what products do they have, what is the market need, and how do we help them to really define the right product before even the funding actually came in. And this covered things like market research, needs assessment, developing, as I mentioned earlier, whether developing new products or refining the current product that they had. It include also monitoring, rolling out the product, but also looking at other housing services, how they could be integrated, things like masonry additions, like water systems and stuff like that. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that is how Microbuild was actually designed towards. So basically it was about that there is profitability in housing microfinance, and also to showcase and catalyze the market to say, how can actually other investors come in and actually invest in such a model towards rolling out of housing microfinance loans to the low-income households, but through basically the financial intermediaries who are the MFIs. Yeah, perhaps I should end there and wait for questions. And I know later we might discuss more in terms of what did the fund achieve.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. We will come back to you in a few minutes. Thank you for this first introduction. I will hand it over to Zama now from South Africa to tell us a bit about the sort of the various experiences that you really have with affordable housing finance, but also actors that actually develop affordable housing in the country. So over to you, Zama.
Thanks, Faye, and evening, colleagues. My name is Zama from DEG. I think if you can just move to the next slide. Development Action Group is an NGO that is based in Cape Town, formed around 1986, where we work with communities around access to land and affordable housing. And just to say, our programs are influenced by the realities on the ground. Our programs are demand-based. They will craft programs based on the needs of the communities today. For example, in the past, we have done PHP projects, I think for the last 20 years, but now we are busy with other programs that are based on the realities of the day. And then I think today I'm going to talk about our own experiences when it comes to working within the PHP space, where within the PHP space, or let me say within South Africa, there's a housing program that is geared towards those who cannot afford to buy houses, whereby financing for that particular housing program is financed by is coming from government in the form of subsidies. If you can move to the next slide. So what is happening is around 2008, we're approached by government to say, look, DEG, can you come and assist in unblocking PHP projects that were in the area of Khayelitsha that were blocked, and the project was worth 67 million. And ours was to say, how do we start to capacitate communities so that they can be the ones who are leading development in their areas? I always say when I talk as DEG, we don't go to communities and lead development. We go to communities and capacitate them so that they can build their own communities. And in this particular case, I mentioned that the project was financed by government through subsidies, but through our engagements on the ground with communities, we encourage them to save towards getting bigger houses. For example, during the time that we're unblocking the Khayelitsha projects, people were getting houses that were 36 square meter houses. But through working with communities on the ground, encouraging them to save, there were community members who managed to build better houses, who managed to build bigger houses through their own savings. That means topping up the money that is coming from government. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, we were given the mandate to deliver 2173 houses in Khayelitsha. Some of the houses, or let me say blocked houses, these communities were supposed to get their houses in the late 90s. Due to mismanagement and corruption, some of these houses were never completed. And we're given the mandate as DEG to say, go and unblock these particular houses. Our mandate was clear. It was just to complete the houses. But because we are an organization that is working on the ground with communities, we took the difficult route to say, look, in the unblocking of these PHP houses, there's this amount of money that is worth 67 million rands. How do we make sure that the money that is coming from government, the money that is coming from individuals circulate within the community of Khayelitsha. That means building small businesses, but also capacitating these communities so that they can build their own houses. So instead of taking a route that has been traveled before, we took the route less traveled, whereby we appointed, if you can just move to the next slide, we worked with emerging construction companies. But before we could even identify the communities that we wanted to work with, the private sector guys that wanted to be involved in the communities. Yeah, I think we always said at DEG, it's very important for everyone within a particular project to share the project vision and values. So what we did was we had this group of 2173 households that were supposed to get their houses. So we engaged with them so that they can better understand our approach of capacitation, our approach of delivering the houses. So we engaged with the communities, the direct beneficiaries, and then we also engaged with indirect beneficiaries. The indirect beneficiaries will be the contractors that benefited, will be the laborers that benefited, but also engaged the local politicians. For example, we've got in South Africa, we've got a ward system. So we went to each and every ward explaining to the different stakeholders, what is it that DEG was doing, who was behind the project, how was the project financed, and how we were planning to deliver the project so that it can be of benefit, not only to the direct beneficiaries in the form of houses, but also the project to be beneficial to those that were indirect stakeholders. I think this one is key because this project was started around 2011 and completed in 2015. But between, I think, 2014, there was a national strike in South Africa where all construction sites were halted. But because the community of Khayelitsha knew exactly what is it that we're doing in Khayelitsha, our site in Khayelitsha was never closed. We had our offices as DEG are in Observatory closer to town, but Khayelitsha is 35 kilometers away from town. And we had a local office where we employed local people. And everyone else understood exactly what is it that we're trying to do. And that particular housing support center in Khayelitsha played the role of an advice office because I spoke about 2173 beneficiaries, but that housing support center office in Khayelitsha did not only benefit those that were going to get houses, but it also benefited some people who had housing issues in Khayelitsha. Okay, you can move to the next one. So I spoke about indirect beneficiaries. For example, emerging construction companies. If you can Google now, quality projects, that's one construction company that's benefited from the Khayelitsha project. We identified 14 local contractors and we trained those contractors. For example, I always say myself, I'm not trained as an engineer. I'm not trained as a planner. I did politics at university. And even those guys who are running these businesses are not trained as construction managers, but they just open businesses because they see opportunities. So what happened is we started to train these particular contractors so that they can better understand. For example, I always say, if you go to townships, most people are bucket builders. They cannot even read the plan. They cannot even interpret. They cannot even put together a bills of quantities. So we started there, making sure that while we are delivering houses, these particular indirect beneficiaries also benefit and contribute to the process of building houses. For example, I think we tapped to private sector partnerships. There's a material supplier in Cape Town called Buco. We approached them to say, look, Buco, there's this project worth 69 million. Can you partner with us? Can you also partner with us in training local contractors? For example, this guy who leads quality projects, I met him in 2011. He did not have a driver's license. Today, he has got a website. He's employing more than 10 people on a full-time basis, and he's able to tender for jobs outside of Khayelitsha. And he was not the only beneficiary. I spoke about 14 local contractors, and we completed with 9. And some of those contractors currently are operating outside of Khayelitsha, are operating outside of the Western Cape, some are in the Eastern Cape, and they are contributing towards job creation. That is a major challenge currently in South Africa. So in this particular project, we saw government providing subsidies. I think communities on the ground saving towards bigger houses, I think saving towards add-ons. If you see one of the houses in the pictures, there's burglar gates there. Burglar gates are not part of what is paid for by the subsidies. So we also encourage them to say, look, beautify your houses. For example, those informal companies who are manufacturing burglar gates also benefited. And when we were calling meetings during 2011 and 2015, there was always people outside of our projects because people were very interested to say, look, how are you doing it, whereby we have got government on board, we have got big private sector companies on board, people are saving towards bigger houses, but also you are contributing towards local economic development. If you can move to the next one. So I said our programs are talking to the realities on the ground. Okay, we completed the PHP projects back around 2017, but during that particular process, we were capacitating emerging construction companies. We were also reading what was happening on the ground. And what we realized on the ground was to say, people now want to densify. And the densification that we saw happening was not driven by any subsidies from government, but the densification was driven by private sector individuals. For example, if you look at that particular slide, around 2017, we saw the emergence of what we call now micro developers who are building flats at the back of their existing houses. I think in South Africa, there's a history of backyarding, whereby people will get a subsidized house from government and build shacks at the back of the house. But from 2017, we have seen a shift now to say, look, these micro developers are individuals who are operating on the ground, building rental stock in numbers at the back of their houses. And at DEG, in a way of responding to that, we started what we call today Contractor and Developer Academy. Contractor and Developer Academy, that's where we capacitate and mentor these emerging developers. That's where we capacitate and train emerging construction companies. And within this particular space, we interact with the developers themselves, we interact with emerging construction companies, we interact with private sector finance institutions, because this particular program is not financed by government, but it's financed by the private sector. We interact with local authorities because without local authorities being involved, people will build outside of the building regulations. If you see some of the pictures at the bottom there, is houses that were built outside of the building norms. And as CDA, we are saying, we are playing a facilitation role now to say, look, the movement or the move from houses that are subsidized by government to housing opportunities, rental options that are purely 100% financed by the private sector. But we are saying there, while these houses are financed by the private sector and the individuals, there's a role of government to play there. There's a role of institutions like NHBRC. There's a role of built environment professionals. For example, if you are operating in a township area, you need an architect, you need a planner to make sure that your plan is approved by local authorities. So we have been engaged in this particular sector, and there's acknowledgement from the city of Cape Town and other local authorities to say, look, these guys are providing what government has failed to do. For example, the database of people looking for houses in South Africa is growing due to, I think, what has been promised by politicians. But in this particular case, we are saying, how do we make sure that we support the scaling up of the sector? And as DEG, through the program at DEG that is called Contractor and Developer Academy, we commissioned the research that was done by Human Science Research Council. And that research is going to be launched tomorrow. that research talks about what needs to be in place to assist the scaling up of the work that is being done by the micro developers. That research, I think now it has been loaded into our website, and those that are interested to join us virtually, I think they can join us virtually. We'll be starting at 9:30 tomorrow to talk to the industry. I think different spheres of government will be part of that, because we're saying as DEG, as CDA, to scale up, you don't only need finance, but you also need to capacitate the micro developers. You also need a local authority that is developmental. You also need national government that is going to provide bulk infrastructure improvements. We also need, I think, the services of maybe, I think in Cape Town, I've got what we call a rental tribunal, because this is new. How do we make sure that we capacitate the landlords, but we also capacitate tenants? Because this is not ownership. The government subsidized houses that were built in Khayelitsha were ownership, but this one is not ownership, is rental. So how do we make sure that everyone else within the space, I think, plays his role? I think if you can just go to the last slide. The last one is just a picture of Litter Park, where I think a lot of research has been done in terms of what needs to be in place. And I think just to end, to say, as part of our support to the micro developers, we also started around 2019 a Facebook page called Affordable Places to Rent in Cape Town townships, whereby once we assist someone in developing these rental units, then we mentor that particular person, we capacitate him so that he can better understand the rental space, why you need to have a lease agreement if you want to have tenants in your place, why you need a will, but also on top of everything else, they need to service the loans that they are getting, I think, from the finance institutions. So I think I will stop there, but to say, to emphasize, to say, to scale up, you need different role players to understand their roles and responsibilities. It starts with the landowner to better understand his roles and responsibilities, going to the tenants, going to the local authorities, going to finance institutions so that they can start to have packages that talks to the needs of the developers. Thank you very much, Bay.
Thank you, Zama. I'm sure we will get a few questions from the audience later on that we can come back to look at some of the aspects that you just raised. I would like to hand back to Jacinta for a second and the last question to her, just to give us an example to how concretely Akiba Mashinani's trust work, and the different financial instruments that you have, but also the community processes they translate into housing projects for the people on the ground.
Okay, thank you, Bai. So as I explained earlier, we have the chingli, which is coin by coin, which is is a term in the savings sector. So initially, Akiba Mashinani Trust used to buy land for our members, but we found that our members will get a land and they are not interested in moving into that land. So we came up with another technology, or how can they be committed in moving from the slum areas to the allocated areas. As I had said earlier, we have what we call in situ. In situ are those slums whereby we need to do some improvement, maybe doing the sanitations, the roads, and all the infrastructures within the slum area. We also have the greenfield housing. This is whereby we purchase land, subdivide into small portions, give it to our members, and also do construction. As shown from this group, you can see our group meetings where we do our savings, where we have all our books. The people who are shown in that picture are the leaders of the groups from different clusters. So the savings money is the one which is used to acquire the land. So initially, as I had explained, Akiba Mashinani Trust used to give out money to purchase land. But right now, the members use their own savings to buy land for themselves. Then Akiba Mashinani Trust finances them to do the building. So can we go to the next slide, please? From this one, in our group meetings, our projects are also determined by our members. they come up with the mode of housing they want to have. This photo is showing an housing project within Nakuru, where we do the greenfield. Our members have already purchased like 2 acres of land. We subdivide these 2 acres of land into small portions, which can accommodate at least 50 members. For the land ownership, we issue them with what we call a share certificate. And also we do the construction as per their plans. We sit down with our architect, with our members, and they come up with the mode of construction they want us to do for them. During the project meeting, this is where the questions comes in, like how many bedrooms do you want to have? What mode of house do you want to have? How do you want your house to look like? Where should it be located? Things like that. So during our group meetings, we have that conversation. We give room for them to discuss and come up with a concrete plan of their house construction. From the housing meetings, that is also where we come up with what the government requires from them. And I had explained earlier, in Kenya, you can never construct a house without an approved housing plan. So the members have to understand also why should we have a plan which is approved by the government. The next slide. So these are some of our members, as I said. There are people who are coming from poor backgrounds. People who don't have businesses. They also don't have houses they can call them. It can get at least $3 or $4 in a day. So she chooses to save $3 or $2 for her to achieve her dreams and her goals. Within these savings, there are 2 targets. One target is to acquire a loan to improve our business. If the supplier of the fish is bringing like 10 fish in a day, she gets a loan so that she can get more fish like 20. From the profit that she gets, she uses that profit to do her savings so that she can realize her dream on becoming a house owner and also owning a piece of land. Unfortunately, from our members, we cannot issue them with what we call land title deed. In our act, you can only get a land title deed with a size of 50 by 100 feet on the ground. But our members only have 20 by 40 feet according to their money, how they can manage to purchase that land. And also as an organization, we don't have a lot of money to purchase for them a bigger piece of land. And we don't also want to overburden them by acquiring more loans for them to repay at a later date. So what Akiba Mashinani does to assist our members in acquiring this loan? 1, we provide the technical support. That is through the staff on the ground. We do capacity building. We also provide the architect who comes up with a plan in guidance of our members with the kind of houses they want to have. The third thing Akiba Mashinani does is to finance them. But we don't fully finance 100% in the housing construction. How do we do it? We have to ask the members from their saving to give a commitment fee, which is 20%. So that is how we select our members who are ready to move out of the slum areas to go and construct a house outside the slums and also where they have purchased. Akiba Mashinani Trust supports with the 80%, which is payable in 96 months, that is 8 years, and with an interest rate of 10% flat rate per annum. So that is how we support our members on housing construction on greenfield. When we go to the institutes on the house improvement, let's say like in Nairobi and Mukuru, you cannot move people from that slum. So what we do replanning of the slum. We create space for them at least to acquire some roads, which are not big roads. We also have to sit down with the county government officials, the land ministry, and the ministries which are relevant in the housing so that they can also advise us. Where can we get more space? If maybe there are some roads which are within the slums, how can we expand this? As the government, what can you provide to these people without them paying? So these people can also get money can also get support from the government. They can provide electricity without paying. They can also give street light. They can also provide for roads. From this illustration here, the first photo, it shows how we come from the slum areas. You see, those are some of the unplanned houses. If you go deeper, you'll find that there are no toilets, there are no roads, there are no schools, there is nothing. In the second photo, these are members who have already formed themselves into the clusters. They have started savings. They have done all the requirements. They have gone through all the trainings, and they have already purchased a piece of land. From the third illustration, after purchasing the piece of land, after the subdivision, now they go through the process of applying for a loan from Akiba Mashinani Trust. Before applying the loan, we also have to do a capacity building so that they can know what are the requirements, what are they expected to do after acquiring the loans, because we have what we call revolving fund. Our capital is not enough to support all our members. Currently, we have almost 3,000 members. Most of our members went slow during COVID period, but we have already constructed around 500 houses or so. But all our members, the 3,000, eventually they would want to have an house. So this revolving fund, from the repayment they do on monthly basis, is what we use to facilitate the next clients on the line. If the money is not enough, we do another application from either our donors from SDS projects who are doing land and housing, or our well-wishers who are willing to support our projects. In the fourth illustration, there is our architecture who has to sit down with the members. He has to show them what plans he has come up with. They have to go to the ground and do an illustration. This is how your house will look like. This is how far it will occupy. And at the end of the day, they also need a small space for their laundry, maybe do a garden, a kitchen garden, and also a small place for their kids to play. The fifth photo, those are some of the houses which have already been started construction, but they are not complete. So the first thing that people need to understand, these people don't start paying their loans immediately. We give them a grace period of 3 months. Within these 3 months, we give room for the housing construction to be done and completed. We give room for at least 1 month for the member to get into the room and settle in. Then from the 4th month, that is where they start doing their monthly repayment. Their monthly repayment is very low. It's at $5 per month or less, according to the size of their houses. Majority will have 2 to 3 bedroom houses, according to their pockets and how affordable they have, and also according to their level of income. In other photos which I have not shared, there are people who are very poor and they can only afford 1 room. So you'll find that from the rental house, there's an advantage for them coming from a rental house which is in the slum and which is not planned to come and own a piece of land and also own a house which is a permanent house. So from the last illustration there, you can see a very happy client who has gone through all these processes. The person has been in Mongano maybe like for almost 6 years, at least to manage to get around $200 to get a piece of land. So it is always a long journey, but it takes a lot of patience for us to achieve our dreams. So in the next slide, this is what we call the in situ. This is the slum upgrading, which is done in Nairobi. Within these slums, what we do, most of them are owned by the government. So we get an MOU with the government, we sit down and discuss. Our people need to get houses which are permanent houses and which are planned. So how can you help us as the government? So they provide the land to us. They give us some lease certificates or titles so that we can be able to construct without interruption. We also have to go and do some signing of agreements within our members, the organization, and the government. So that is how we improve the slums within the slum areas. So basically, in most of our slums, we cannot be able to do such kind of a house. Others, we are not even allowed to do a story building. So we can only do the iron sheets, 1 or 2 rooms, and that is the end of it. But at the end of the day, what we are looking for is a well-planned place for our members to settle in. Next slide.
That should be the last one.
Okay, so and they have been really helpful to the Federation of Kenya. We are also in Uganda, we are also in Tanzania, we are also in South Africa. So we have also been doing what we call exchanges. Members from other countries will come to Kenya and learn what mode of houses do you have? What challenges do you go through? How do you manage to do your savings? With your little savings, how do you manage to own a house and also to own a land? So that is one of the key points we have been doing exchanges from one country to another, from one county to another, and that is what has made our project successful. So thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Jacinta, for really telling us this housing journey of some of your members of Akiba Mashinani Trust. I'm sure if you have questions again, you're very welcome to put them in the chat, and we can come back to Jacinta just afterwards. We will have yes, thank you, thanks to you. We will have a last question addressed to Daniel. So we just heard from you the way Microbuild Fund addresses the challenge of even the availability of housing finance. We, as housing professionals or people who are, working in the sector, we know how somewhat neglected actually that sector is. So what we would like to hear from you now, and this will be the last question of our round table, is about some of the learnings that you've gathered from the Microbuild Fund so far. And actually, sorry about the typo, it's Microbuild Fund, but also, and what is your vision really? What are the perspectives for the future through this fund, but also more generally in working in the sector of affordable housing finance?
Yeah, so actually it's fun in the project.
Yes.
So Razak, so we have, as I presented earlier, so we have actually shown how we can mobilize financing and develop mechanisms to reach low-income households with a housing finance solution. And basically, when we were planning, we looked at one, delivering impact, but also demonstration effect. Okay, and hence I'll talk the achievements based on the two. So if you look at the impact side and particularly the funding and outreach as of February this year, so we actually were able to disburse $153 million within 59 institutions in 33 countries. And you can see the geographical distribution on the right-hand side of different distribution in across the world. But also we have reached more than 200,000 households, which equates to more than 1 million individuals through the funding directly. And out of that, if you look at the geographical and the gender composition, basically it's 60% rural and 68% women. So basically, based on the impact, we actually reached directly the targeted market, although the mechanism is a process from the investor to the MFI to basically a low-income household. But also on the catalytic side, almost $650 million in net funds have been leveraged by the investees institutions, which is basically 4.5 times the original funding of $100 million funding that we actually did. And our aim was to get 10 times than the original. So we can say almost halfway there as a way to prove the catalytic growth of the funding. But the most important as well, we have proved that it's self-sustainable and it's profit-making. Okay, so if you can move to the last slide. So as I mentioned, we are in a wind down phase. We plan to end around June 2025, and basically we started looking at phase 2. We engaged consultants called iGravity to do a feasibility study to say, so what are these, if we want to do a similar model, similar approach, what do you think can we improve on? And hence it was very clear that the focus should not just be on microfinance, but it should be also in terms of the housing value chain actors, which is the housing developers and particularly the SMEs. And hence then we are looking at having around $500 million as the next phase towards actually supporting those 3 areas, which is basically SMEs, the developers, but also the MFIs. And most probably looking at the markets that were least touched, particularly the sub-Saharan Africa this time around, hopefully, to actually support. But it doesn't mean we haven't worked in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa. I can share some experience, for example, the technical assistance we did for the Nyumba smart loans with KWFT in Kenya. So we actually helped them to build that product to a point that from 2014 to 2022, they've actually, through this loan, they've actually disbursed more than 100,000 loans. And they've actually disbursed, in terms of value, approximately $58 million. So basically, it's a show that it's showing that basically microfinance can work, and it has worked, and hence then it's demonstrating the approach or the mechanisms that we can actually use to really address housing finance for particularly a low-income household in the African market. And hence we still want to continue to showcase and demonstrate the impacts of the Microbuild Fund across Africa and other markets, but also to mobilize more public and private investors for more financing in the future. So yeah, so in a summary, I think that's where we're trying to look at.
Thank you, Daniel. I would now, well, thanks to all of our speakers and panelists, I would really like to now open the floor to our audience to ask some questions. And again, you can do that via the chat if you have any questions. In the meanwhile, maybe I will just ask one short follow-up question to Zama, if that is all right. While I was listening to your presentation, I was just wondering, you know, how do you ensure that these micro developers, entrepreneurs, they respond actually to the needs of the communities? Like, how do you integrate that aspect into your work?
Okay.
And maybe also just this goes maybe to all of our speakers, if you could comment a bit on, you know, how do you ensure environmental standards as well? Are there those preoccupations and aspects that you take into consideration within your work?
Okay, I think I mentioned during my presentation that we started a Facebook page back in 2019, Affordable Places to Rent in Cape Town Townships. It has got more than 23,000 members. What is great about that particular Facebook page, we use data from that to influence, to analyze, and to advise the micro developers. For example, if you go to that particular page as a landlord, you'll advertise what you have in terms of a housing opportunity, but also the tenants will come in there to say, look, I'm looking for this type of accommodation. I'm looking for a flat to rent that is closer to amenities, that is closer to the rank. I'm looking for a place that has got no shared ablution facilities. So once we get that intelligence from the tenants, then we advise. There's reports that we generate out of the Facebook page that we share with our landlords to say, look, this is what the market is telling us. If you invest in this particular community, that's where the demand is. These are the rentals For example, if you take a community like Lita Park in Kailicha, where the houses are bond financed, then accommodation is more expensive than other places where the houses were financed by government. So the data that we are getting from the Facebook page, we're using it to influence and to engage with the developers to say, look, this is what the tenants are calling for. I think when it comes to also engagements with government, that's where we talk about neighborhood development to say, look, there's more flats being built in this particular area. How do you start to follow up in terms of improvements in basic amenities, building of extra schools, building of maybe a taxi rank? So I think we use information that we're getting from the Facebook page to influence how these developers are building their units.
Thank you, Zama. I also have a question to Daniel and Jacinta maybe at the same time, since at some sorts we have, Daniel presenting these financial products that were implemented with the help of the Microbuild Fund in Kenya as well. And then on the other side, we have these organized communities who are doing everyday work on the ground. So I'm just putting this out there, like how in your vision, how could these two things come together? Could you envision a way in which we could make meet investment that comes through a fund such as Microbuild Fund or initiatives of that sort with community organizations, community-based organizations? How can we bring those together? How are we maybe bringing those already together?
So the way, as I shared earlier, the way the mechanisms work is we have an investor, we have a financial intermediary, and then we have a low-income households. We are trying to look and say, in terms of the individual households, how do we bring in, for example, SMEs and developers? But then when we talk about the financial intermediaries, there are different types of financial intermediaries. We have the MFIs, we have the commercial banks, we have the community, for example, the community trust from my colleague here on the panel, and the SACCOs and the likes. So I think the issue is, one, I see them as financial intermediaries, okay, benefiting from this direct investment from the investors directly. Although, as just as a caveat that you need to have a demonstration to test and say, how does that work? Because the way the MFI works is a bit different from the way, let's say, a SACCO operates, okay? And hence then, to make it sustainable, how will that look like? Or how will that investment look like in a SACCO? And because we've already demonstrated for an MFI. So it's possible, but then we need support. If we can get donor support to test these models, to test this approach, to say, can we use the Microbuild model and partner with the local SACCOs, the local trusts, to actually develop the same mechanism to actually target the low-income households. So I believe it's possible, it's the same model, but in the middle, we need to prove and say, how is that sustainable? How will that work? Because if you look at the work it went through building capacity of MFIs, it took years to really get to a level whereby the MFIs have the right product, internal processes, internal capacities, and hence then we'll have to look and say, what are the levels of the SACCOs or the trusts that are there? How will the product look like? Their capabilities, because this is investors' money, it needs returns. So we have to be really strict in terms of the processes. The returns should be guaranteed and stuff like that. So I'm seeing them operating as a financial intermediary still, but then it might not be perhaps the same approach. It might be a bit different, but almost similar model. I hope I answered you.
Okay, also maybe to add on what Daniel has said, as much as our projects are in place, we are also trying to make them affordable to our clients. We are also looking at what our government promised in Kenya. We have the 4 big plans, and none of them has already kicked off. So that's why as NGOs, as MFIs, as SACCOs, we are trying as much as possible to source for finances from the outside world, from all well-wishers, from the donors, at least to make our people achieve their dreams. So what we are also lacking is the capacity, the capital to realize their dreams. And also with other organizations, maybe from your end, and also from Kenya, that is from Daniel, and also maybe from South Africa, we can also come together, come up with a system which is workable for our people. After listening to all of them, we have one category of our clients, that is the poor people. So what can we do as the people on the ground to make sure our people get what they are looking for? So maybe what we can have is the action plan. How can we organize ourselves? Maybe come up with a very good proposal, look for donors, and also come up with a plan on how we can have affordable housing system for all the poor people, maybe living in the slums or maybe living in the rurals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta, for this call for action. We also have a few comments.
So
Sorry,
if,
Daniel.
if I can add, I think affordable housing is one of our key priorities also. And hence, that's why sometimes we are skeptical of saying we just bring money that basically sometimes becomes very expensive towards the low end. And hence, how do we bridge that to ensure that even the processes, even the day-to-day process of actually disbursing loans and stuff doesn't make it very expensive for the end beneficiary. And hence, I think I like the call for action, and we are open, looking for donors, investors who are willing to really participate and test this model, test this approach of saying, how do we bring the local communities within these such mechanisms that we've demonstrated that they're basically profitable and sustainable.
Thanks to both of you. I think what is really exciting also to listen to is that all three of you, you're sort of thinking outside of the box and looking for really hands-on solutions, to the challenges that are out there. I would still like to, I know that we're getting towards the end, but we will take another 5 minutes. And since we have a few comments in the chat. So we have a comment from Henny, and I think this is something that all of you in a way address in your work, is the importance of the construction process and how affordable eventually a housing unit will be at the end. So there's a question of technology, of course, but we also heard from Jacinta other questions that are more linked to the actual building process, with community work, with their support, whereby the community works as housing developers. We heard from Zama also about the role of these micro developers that haven't been regarded as actually those providing housing maybe beforehand can be supported. And I'm sure, Zama, you could also share a lot more about your work. You will have your webinar and launch of the report tomorrow. So that's an important opportunity for all of you who would like to know more about that. And I would just like to come to a question from Mwelu from Kenya. So regarding Nakuru, there's risks of flooding. So how do you, Jacinta, how do you ensure that those are taken into account in the planning process? That is one question, if you could respond quickly. And then the question about amenities, social infrastructure that have to come with housing. I think you partially responded that through the work that you're doing with the government at various levels. But if you could comment very quickly on that.
Okay, thank you, Noel, for your question. About Nakuru, we are one of the groups which was affected by the floods. But initially, when we were buying that land, the lake was 5 kilometers from our location. So this being is the climate change that we are experiencing, we're also taking into consideration from the time flooded starting coming up, what action plan do we have for our members? So we are looking at where else can we purchase our pieces of land, which is safe from the floods. We also have the volcanoes from the other side where we have the geothermal. So we are also in touch with the government for advice. As much as we want to buy the piece of land, we also need advice from the geologists and also advise us, is this place prone for construction? We also have challenges in Nakuru where we cannot do more than 3-story, but it's something which has been changing over time. So with the climate change, we are in touch with the government, we are in touch with the relevant officials, so that we also don't put our people at risk.
Thank you, Jacinta. We still have questions and comments coming in. From Barry Pinsky, Daniel, if you could quickly comment on how you keep those costs down. You also already mentioned that as one of the biggest challenges, of course, how to target the lowest segments of the population, and also maybe if you can give us an example of the target group, maybe from the Nyumba Smart Loan, since you mentioned them earlier.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to respond to Henny in terms of the affordability and construction. We fully agree. And we actually, as Habitat, funded one of the technology providers called iBuild. If you look at the iBuild, basically, one of the reasons was similar to say, how do you help in terms of construction, which ultimately helps in affordability in terms of bringing all the, let's say, suppliers that are affordable in one platform, project management in one platform, and that process of managing the construction. And hence, I agree that technology is massive, but also in terms of the innovations, alternative ways of building nowadays through technological innovations, things like a lot of plastics materials being, let's say, reused for building materials and stuff like that. So I fully agree that technology is actually massive. With regards of how do we help in terms of the costing for MFIs, we look at different ways. So for example, some of the MFIs, we find that distribution of costs is very massive. And then we recommend and support in terms of how do you come with, let's say, digital channels to really help, because we have seen that digital channels have really improved in terms of the costs. So how do we embed digital channels in terms of the loan processing, for example? That really helps to reduce the costs, but also in terms of, for example, credit writing. We've seen things like credit scoring. Now technology actually gives a credit rating of a person. And hence we're trying to say, how do we now embed that towards housing microfinance, also housing finance solutions, to ensure that we really try to reduce the costs of processing a loan, which then ultimately reduces the cost. In terms of the segment, it's a bit different depending on the market, really, and the target market of that MFI. So it's very hard to say which is the band, but then that depends. After we do analysis and a lot of research, we can actually come up with the right target band in a particular locality, depending on income of different people around that area. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. We have a question regarding density. So we've seen a few pictures about single family homes. What about more dense forms, urban forms? To any of you?
I think maybe if I can come in there, I think as DEG, we are saying there's different housing products within the South African market. Some of these are led by government and some are led by private sector. For example, within South Africa, we've got what is called social housing. That will cater more for families, and those are families within the middle income. I think the work of the micro developers is, I think these guys are targeting young graduates. I think who are just coming out of university. I think those not fully fledged families. For example, some of the units will be as small as 15 square meters. The biggest one will be, I think, 2-bedroom houses. That will be around 35 square meters. So it's not targeting big families, but we're saying it's one product that is assisting the government in South Africa to dent the housing demand. And we're not saying to government, do away with social housing. We're not saying to government, do away with the houses that are subsidized by government, but we are saying this sector is producing in numbers. And how do we scale up the work of the sector? I think just to also mention that, I started to mention that backyard housing in South Africa is the provider of housing, but there's no policy in South Africa that talks to the backyarding in South Africa. So I think the report is also going to start to assist policymakers to engage within the space to say, look, what regulations needs to be in space to support the scaling up? What role of national government is there when it comes to infrastructure improvements? For example, the micro developers are saying to us, we are prepared to pay towards infrastructure improvements. And hence, one of our roles as DEG, while we are lobbying government to simplify planning approvals, we are also capacitating the micro developers so that they can also step up and take their roles and responsibilities. We don't want them to build flats that are going to fall in the next 2 years. We want them to be responsible, to build quality stock, but to understand that they've got loans to service. Hence, the issue of a will is important. I always say when I talk to them, if there's no will in place and Zama gets 1 million from I Build home loans, for example, then I'm hit by COVID in the next 6 months. Maybe someone will come to say Zama was a good man. He does not owe anyone. But if there's a will in place, then my next of kin will better understand that there's a loan that needs to be serviced. So the capacity building is very key so that the finance institutions can get their money and reinvest, because this sector is growing. Hence, we initiated that research to say, look, what needs to be in place? What is the role that should be played by the developers themselves? What is the role that should be played by the local authorities? Outside of the planning approvals, we are saying within the report, the city or the local authorities should play a developmental role. There should be advice offices whereby the developers can go to local authority offices and get advice. But we're saying those advice offices should be in partnership with other sectors, because we're not just pointing fingers to the local authorities, but we're saying different role players needs to take up their responsibility in the scaling up of the sector. Hence, I think that research, if you look at the link that I sent, is an article, and within that article, there's a link to the research that will be launched. And luckily for us in Cape Town, we've got the support of the political principals. For example, the deputy mayor will be doing an opening remarks in that particular launch tomorrow. So we've got political support, but we've got also champions within the city of Cape Town who are willing to engage with the outside stakeholders in scaling up of the work of the micro developers. Thank you, Bay.
Thank you, Zama, also for reminding us the role of the various stakeholders. So I would like to conclude now our question and answer session, since we are already a bit over time, and just hand over to Marine for a few concluding remarks before concluding the session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea, and thank you to all our speakers today for having done an amazing job and showing us very concretely what was happening on the ground. What I found very interesting, it was that all of you seems to address the problem through different aspects, and as we were saying earlier, through different parts of the value chain. So of course with the Akiba Mashinani Trust, of course with the end users and small business owners, and we've seen that you have like 3,000 members now. With the Microbuild fund, of course, through the microfinance institutions, and we've seen that through them you were reaching out to more than 200,000 households. And then with Development Action Group, we've seen your focus on the developers and contractors. I think those three together really makes the value chain of the housing, and it's very interesting how you manage each of you indifferently to participate in more affordable housing and to more giving more agency to the people who need it. One last thing that I would say as well, I think is quite striking in all your interventions was how you all provide a very holistic approach to what you're doing, with technical assistance, capacity building. Again, we've seen with the Akiba Mashinani Trust that you were providing a lot of services to your end users, like I've noted down, like the enterprise development services, the community banking organization services, and this to really empower those end users. For Microbuild Fund, we've seen how you help the MFIs design the housing microfinance loan product on top of providing the funding, of course. And with Development Action Group, we've seen how you've organized an academy for the developers and the contractors and to help structure the market. And I think this is really useful. And for those three examples, I think it's really interesting to see how further you go in what you're doing by having this holistic approach, this broad approach. So anyway, I'd like to thank you again, the three of you, for your interventions, Bea and urbaMonde for all the work also that has been done to create those webinars, to our interpreters today, Kwame and Georgina, for an amazing and difficult translation services, and obviously all of you, our audience today. And I'd like to thank finally the AUHF, so the African Union for Housing Finance, which is really the industry body in the housing sector. And I invite all of you to reach out if you'd like to know more about it and if you'd like to be part of it. And that's the end of our webinar series. That was the second last part. All based on the study that we've done. urbaMonde, Urbasen, and CAF have co-financed you. And thank you so much, everyone. And have a great end of the day.